Good morning. How is everyone today? Great. How do you beat those moves up there? Well, on behalf of Marathon County Special Ed Consortium, Dave and I would like to welcome you here to Edgar for our joint in-service, and I hope it's our first annual endeavor. We've got 5 of the 6 consortium schools here today, so let's do a shout out. We've got Abbotsford, Rosholt, Marathon, Spencer, Edgar. Okay. We wish they were here.
Our speaker this morning made his home in Wisconsin for 20 years, working at Beloit College and UW-Madison, and then as a full-time leadership trainer.
Paul Wesselman has been the keynote speaker at hundreds of conferences, including the Wisconsin Association of School Counselors, there you go, Wisconsin Retired Educators Association, none of us yet, and Wisconsin Association of School Boards.
In 1999, he began sending out a brief inspirational email called Ripples, which now has over 30,000 subscribers and earned him a nickname, the Ripples Guy.
We are excited to have him here with us today in Edgar to share a collection of his stories and ideas that he's assembled for us called Ripples into Waves, Small Actions to Unleash Potential in Ourselves and Others.
5 years ago, Paul moved to Cincinnati, Ohio to be closer to family, but he told us that he still considers Wisconsin his heart home. Please help us welcome Paul Wesselman.
So I know that for you, this was just regular weather, but for me, I have lived in Cincinnati for 5 years now, so I have picked up there when they have 1.5 inches of snow. They're like, let's close the schools and batten down the hatches. So this morning I'm up, I'm like, okay, I can do this. I remember how to drive on snow, and I gave myself an hour to drive from Wausau, and I'm like going, and I'm good. I'm up to 35, and I'm up to 40, and people are like, come on! Let's go. So I apologize if I was the person who annoyed you this morning on air. You're awake, you're here. And for some of you, I think it's a chance to be at work without the little kids and you need a little break. Yay. Some of you, it's like, I wish I was in bed. I get it. One of the toughest gigs that I ever do, which I almost never do anymore, are school assemblies, because I remember how I treated the assembly speaker. And believe me, karma exists. Because when I had to do a few of those, but the second hardest group is teachers. And when I started this work and was hanging out, I was all excited because I loved my teachers, and there's 2 things I get to say to you. One is I'm sorry for all the ways I was an ornery little and 2, I get to say thank you, which I'll say a little bit later. But when I got in here, I was thinking teachers, they can relate to what it's like to be up here, and they're gonna be really compassionate, and they're gonna be like, okay, oh no. You guys are like, let's see what this guy's got. And then you think of the student who is the most annoying student in your classroom, and you're like, I get to act like that person today. Are they going to teach me like their favorite teacher, or are they going to treat me like a substitute teacher? Which is it? We have a long way to go today, and by the time we get out of here at 2:30, I am... No. I do want to start off with an apology. I was the student that you liked me, you loved me by the end of the year, but sometimes you wanted to strangle me. And that whole waiting until you called on me thing was really hard for me from the beginning. And I would put my hand up, but then I would start talking, and you're like, And I know the look. There were times when you looked at me and you had a smile on your face, and you gave me the mental smack. I saw it. It registered. I got it. I'm pretty sure if they would have had Ritalin back in the day, I'm pretty sure I would have had an IV drip walking around school. I'm pretty sure. But you were so good to me also, and you helped me out, and you recognized when I was in trouble. And so we're going to get to thank yous a little bit later. My job, I get to hang out with all kinds of groups to help them grow personally and professionally. And I'll tell you that I tend to divide professional development into two skill sets: reaching out skills to help people be more effective at connecting with each other and the people they work with, the people they serve, and then reaching in skills to help people more consistently bring their best self to work and to life. So we're going to dabble, and we're going to have an adventure, and we're going to go around today. We're going to have a lot of fun. This is going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of breaks. Some of what we're going to explore today came out of an assignment that I had in school early on, an assignment to develop a workshop for a group of leaders. And we had 8 weeks to work on our little workshop, and we were to pick a group of leaders, interview some people from that group, and come up with a 1-hour presentation that would help them be more effective in their work. And the group of leaders I ended up choosing were people who are in the helping professions: teachers, nurses, counselors. And I don't know if you, in your academic life, ever had an 8-week project where you actually started working on it the first week. Have you ever done that? It turns out, when you give me something and you have 8 weeks, when I start the first week, the quality gets a little higher. And I became obsessed with this, and I started week 1, and I interviewed some teachers, some nurses, and some counselors, and I asked them, what would help you be more effective in your work? And I took tons of notes, and I put them up on a whiteboard, and I spent 7 weeks looking at the information, piecing it together, and putting a little bit here, and putting together a set of information and a set of activities. And I'm proud to say that I got an A on my assignment. And a couple people in my class came up afterwards and said, can you come give this presentation at our staff meeting, because, oh my gosh, people need this. And the content was pretty similar, basic stuff that you know. I had the acronym GREAT, G-R-E-A-T, and it was goal setting, role modeling, esteem building, attitude adjusting, and time and stress managing. Because what I discovered is that it wasn't so much that I had something to teach teachers. It was that I, from what I was hearing, had something to remind them. And a lot of what I was sharing was something they already knew, was something they were actually teaching to students. And what I started to learn then, that I bet a lot of you already know well, is that those of us in the helping professions, those of us who feel called to help others, are incredible at helping other people. And we can be awful at taking care of ourselves. And we sometimes put other people's needs ahead of our own with such frequency and such intensity and such passion that what starts out at the beginning of the year is, oh, welcome. How can I help you? What are we going to do to make this year the best year ever? Evolves over weeks and months, and in some cases years, of putting other people's needs ahead of their own into, what do you want? I'm trying to help you here. I'm giving you the best I've got. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm becoming my mother. And you're doing a lot. And what I discovered, and what I ended up offering in that assignment, and what I've accidentally made a career out of, is spending time with people in the helping professions to take all the amazing content that they are teaching, that they are leading with, and putting up a mirror and saying, you too. Because when the most important student that you serve is yourself, the capacity that you have as an educator grows. But I've discovered that that's a tough sell, because a lot of folks in this room are so programmed to put other people's needs ahead of their own that if I say anything that sounds like take care of yourself, it sounds selfish. And so what I try to do when I'm sharing some specific messages, because a lot of what I have to share with you today, you're going to go, yeah, I know. Because for me, it's not about teaching you stuff that you don't know. It's about reminding you and then saying, what if you actually did something with it? What if you really authentically practice some of this, what might happen? When I'm hanging out with groups at professional conferences, we mentioned WASC and the school board. Last week it was Wisconsin Park and Rec Association. When I'm hanging out with folks at their annual professional development conference, and it's the first event that I'm the kickoff speaker, the first thing that happens is after I do a little welcome hello, I ask people, why are you sitting there? And I'll ask this of you too, because I watched you come in here this morning. And you came in one of two ways. If you came in a group, you came in your little clump, and you were like this. You're like, unless you didn't have enough caffeine yet, and then you were like this. And then you had to make sure that you found a seat to sit together. And God forbid if you arrived alone, because this is how you walked in. I'll be you, you be me. This is you walking in. You're like this. You're like. Like everyone else here is a monster except, people from my school, from my classroom. This is my group. And it's the same is true when it's Wisconsin Park and Rec and school counselors. They walk into the annual conference, and I ask them, how many of you came here to meet some new people and get some new ideas? And they all raise their hand. And I say, how many of you this would be a better use of your time if you left here having met more people than you know and you left with some new ideas? And they all raise their hand. And then I ask them, how many of you right now are sitting next to people you already know really well? And guess what? They all raise their hand. And I say, brilliant! Here's you coming to an event where it is your hope or your expectation that you meet some new people, that you get some new ideas. And the first thing you do is plop down with people you know. And I'm not judging you because it happens with every single group. My question for you is, why? Even in environments where we say we want to learn, where we want to grow, where we want to connect with new people, how many of you would admit that there are probably people in this room that you don't know well who have got ideas and strategies that could help you grow as a professional? How many of you, this would be a better use of your time if you left here and got on your bus or got back in the car at 11 o'clock and you had some specific things that you could apply in your life or in your work that would help you be more effective? How many of you, this would be a better use of your time? I know. I get some of you are like this. No. I know. And it's okay. I'm not going to make you move, I promise. Because I saw some of you are like, I ain't moving. If that's where you're going with your little la la la, bye-bye. I know. I'm not going to ask you to move. But here's my question for you. Why, when I ask groups, why, even in an environment where you want to meet new people, why is our default to sit with people we know? Because it's comfortable. And when you want to feel comfortable in this world, it's important that you surround yourself with people you know, with people who are like you, with people who look at the world the way you look at the world, with people who look at Governor Walker the way you do, President Trump the way you do, this issue, that issue the way you do, when you want to feel comfortable. And it won't surprise you to learn that when you want to learn and when you want to grow and when you want to get something out of professional development, a job, a life, it is essential that we find the strength and the courage to step away from our comfort zone and to seek challenge, to stretch ourselves. When I was in college, I got really involved. My original plan from 8th grade on is I was going to be a psychology major in college, and I was going to be pre-law. I was either going to be a psychologist or I was going to be a lawyer that fights for justice. Because in 8th grade, that's what I thought a lawyer was. They fight for justice. And I got to, I should pause right here and tell you where I grew up, because I grew up in Illinois, and when I moved to Wisconsin, I found out you had names for us. Yeah. In the fall of '92, when I landed here to work at Beloit College and then up at UW Management, people were like, oh, you're a fib. And I'm like, I'm not a liar. I don't lie. And then someone whispered what fib stood for, and I was like, that is horrible. Until I had lived here a couple years, and then when I saw someone on the interstate with Illinois plates on, fib, get off the road. But my junior year of college, my dean of students says, Paul, it is very clear you love being in student activities and student government and RA. I love being a resident assistant. And he says, you know, there's this master's degree you can get where you can be an RA for your whole life. And I was like, shut up, I'm in. So I went to Bowling Green State University in Ohio and spent 2 years in the education department getting a master's degree in higher education, learning about how to create learning environments for college students and student development theory specifically for college students. And 2 years of taking a ton of notes, 2 years of taking a lot of classes, and I confess I've forgotten a lot of it. Can you relate? But there is this theory about how students learn and grow that I picked up in an environments class that I use every day of my life. And this guy, Nevitt Sanford, said that real learning can only take place in a classroom. He was talking about college campus. I think this applies everywhere. He said, real learning can only take place in a classroom or on a college campus if a student has the right balance between feeling comfortable and feeling challenged. He said, if students don't feel safe, they can't learn. So our first job in higher education is to make sure students feel comfortable, to make sure they feel safe. But if all we do is get them comfortable, they get bored. And I know, and you know, what it's like to have somebody who's bored in your class. They usually don't go, I would like some extra assignments, please. I'm not sufficiently challenged in this part of the curriculum that we are covering. No, they either sleep or they act out. Yes? And so our job as educators is to make sure that we are finding the right challenge for them. I think this comes intuitively even if you didn't learn Nevitt Sanford's theory of challenge, and he called it challenge and support. This makes sense to you, and you probably have been applying it in your work all along. Where I find it useful is for us to ask ourselves when we're not bringing our best selves to work most days. Are we out of balance in some ways? Because sometimes when we're not bringing our best selves, it's because we're overwhelmed. Work is hard. Life is hard. And we need comfort. We need help. But sometimes when we're not showing up and doing our best, juicy, fabulous work, it's actually not because we're overwhelmed. It's because we're bored. And I'll tell you from managing residence halls at Beloit College and then at UW-Madison for several years, students here do stupid stuff. True? And by the way, alcohol is a common problem on many campuses. Wisconsin, you all know how to drink like nobody's business. And these students will get drunk and do stupid stuff, and they'd have to come talk to the hall director. And early on, my job was to say, don't do that. But when I started thinking about this, and I started asking students, how did you end up in that situation? Why did that happen? I discovered the answers were kind of falling in two different categories. Some of it was, I'm overwhelmed. I was freaking out about this. I was frustrated about that. I needed a stress release, so I got drunk and did something stupid. But there were this other flavor of answers, right? The people over here who were saying, didn't have anything else to do. And I discovered that the very same behavior in two different students at two different points in their life was actually calling for a different intervention. Because some of them I was needing to get them help or suggest maybe healthier ways to manage stress. And some of them, I needed to give them a job. I needed to find a way, what's the thing? What's the angle? How many of you admit there's been situations either in a classroom setting where you were a student or in a job where you felt like you weren't doing your best work, not because it was too hard, but because you hadn't found the right challenge and it just didn't grab you. It was kind of boring. How many of you admit that's been something? Yeah. And so what I want to just start off right away is by suggesting to you, if you, students you serve, your colleagues, if you're noticing somebody isn't bringing their best self most days, one of the best first questions you can ask yourself or a colleague or a student is, what's out of balance? Do they need help? Do they need a challenge? A couple years ago, I was getting on a plane to go out to a college that I speak at their new student orientation. I do a lot of college orientation programs, so right when students land. And this particular school out in California, Cal Poly, I speak to a stadium full of 10,000 parents and students every fall. It's a crazy big gig. I get so nervous every year. And a couple times before I hang out with the new students, their parents, I meet the orientation leaders for a couple pep talks the 2 days before and the day before the big stadium event. And 2 falls ago, I was headed out there, and I was on the plane, and I had grabbed my speech notes from the previous year. And for that group, I keep the notes, and I make notes. I get back to the hotel after a speech, and I try to remember to take a bunch of notes, what worked, what didn't. And then I don't do anything with them other than stick it in the file, bring it out next year, dust it off. What do I need to change? How do I make it better? And I'm looking at my notes, and I see this thing handwritten. It says, discomfort is required for growth. You cannot remain comfortable and grow into the best possible version of yourself. And it's got quotation marks around it. I'm like, this is good. This is amazing. Where did I get it? Why is it written on my notes in handwritten notes? And so I thank goodness for Wi-Fi on airplanes now. I got connected to GoGo Air, and I Googled this, in quotes, discomfort is required for growth. And I'm like, oh, I want to source this and everything. And it turns out there is exactly one reference to this line on Google. And it's in an obscure physical therapy manual that says, when you're working with clients and trying to help them do their exercises, they need to determine how far they're going to go and how much they're going to do, because discomfort is required for growth, but they have to establish how much discomfort they can tolerate. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure last year I had not been reading an obscure physical therapy journal. Where did I get this? But I loved it. So I go and I give my first pep talk to the orientation leaders that day, and they all kind of know me because they remember me from the previous orientation. And so it's like this great love affair, and I'm like, yeah, good to see you. And it's like, by the way, I got to tell you this quote that I must have said to you all last year if some of you are returners. I don't know where I found it, and I read it, and I made the screen so that I could share it with them. And I said, this is good stuff. We made our point. And these 2 orientation leaders came up and they afterwards, and they said, Paul, you really don't remember where you got that quote? And as soon as I saw their faces, I totally remembered. I was like, holy shit. Oh, I'm sorry, I just dropped the S-bomb. Oops. Whoops. What's the consequence? $1 to smack me? I don't know what ruler? No, that's Catholic school. That was bad, Paul. Although, tangent, if we're going to drop the S-bomb, let me just say this about the S-bomb. I love that we can't say that word on television. That's like considered a big, bad, no-no word. But the B word, you can say on television. We live in a society where you can degrade women, but you can't degrade poop. Aside over. Sorry. No cursing, Uncle Paul. Okay. And these 2 orientation leaders, who happen to be twins, which helped me remember instantly, that after I gave my first orientation leader pep talk the previous year, I had gone into the cafeteria to meet with whoever wanted to hang out with me afterwards, and there were 4 students sitting there really quietly, which is very unlike orientation leaders. And these 4 guys were just like really quiet, and they looked like they either had a hangover or something. And I came up to them and I said, are you guys okay? And they said, yes, we're just really, really introverted. And we know the next couple days are going to be really, really extroverted, and we're just collecting ourselves. And I said, oh, well, I would love to sit down and chat with you about that. And we start talking, and I talk about the fact that for introverts, being an orientation leader is something they know how to turn on the extroversion, but it's different than for us extroverts because it's going to drain them, whereas it infuses energy into me, right? Like this gets me high. And I will get to the hotel this afternoon. I'm staying in Rockford, driving partway back home tonight, and I will stay in Rockford, and I will get there. And even though I will have given this presentation that uses so much of my energy, I will still have energy. And even though I will have driven 3 hours, I will still have energy. And I'll get them like, oh, how are you? Oh my God, I just gave this speech. And some poor introvert on the other side, well, here's your key. Shut up and go to your room. But at some point I said to them, this is going to be out of your comfort zone. And remember what I always say about needing to seek comfort and balance, and that you have to step out of your comfort zone. It's true that discomfort is required for growth. You can't remain comfortable and grow into the best version of who you are. And when I said it, I will never forget the look on their face. They were like, and I was like, that is some good stuff. And I jotted it down on my notes. And the next day, I mentioned it to the orientation leaders. I ended up using it in my big stadium speech. Discomfort is required for growth. You cannot remain comfortable and grow into the best possible version of yourself. If you get too uncomfortable, you cannot grow either. And that physical therapy journal helped me make an even better point, that it's certainly true that too much discomfort does not work either. Here's the problem when it comes to the balance. In lots and lots of ways, human beings naturally seek a balance, but not in this one. When we get into a situation where there's a choice between the path that is more comfortable, and we know the outcome, and we've been there before, and we know what to do, and we know how it comes out, and the unknown, I'm not sure what could happen. It could be awesome, it could be good, it could be lead to fabulous, but who knows? We tend to default to over here, because built into our system is a little message that often whispers, stay alive. And so anytime we're in a situation where it's like, I don't know, it's like, let's default to the safe side. So we have to dare ourselves to step out a little bit more. And so this is a concept that for some people, I say this in almost every one of my presentations, that's the thing they remember. And that's the thing that they find leaving, is that they're thinking about ways either that they need to do a better job at taking care of themselves, or maybe they need to find a way to insert some freshness into their job, into their lives, because they're coasting. And it turns out coasting does not always make life easier. Sometimes, if you're over here, it does. But sometimes it actually makes it worse. True? One more thing. I'm almost done with my introduction to my presentation. Sorry, I take tangents. I added this slide last year. I have a little ritual before presentations I developed years ago where I go find a quiet spot. I went around the corner to an empty hallway, and then all my high school years started flooding back to me, all the good memories and all the horrible memories. I was like, flashbacks, okay. And then I did my little ritual of taking 3 deep breaths and thinking the word here on the inhale and now on the exhale. And I've been doing it for years. I don't know how I developed it, but it really helps me get centered. The first time I think it, I'm actually not listening to myself. I'm worried, is my zipper up? Is my mic pack on okay? Is everything okay? Are they going to like me? Is everyone here? How's it going to go? The second time I think the word here now, I remember, I'm going to be better if I can really be present, and I can really give them my best self. And the third time I hear myself say, here now, I remember, this is the most important speech I've ever given. This is the most important group of people I have ever had the privilege of hanging out with. Not just because they're educators, not because some of them saved my life once, but because this is the group of people that I am with, here and now. And I'm able to come up here, even though I'm nervous, and I get nervous before every presentation. When I don't, I cuss too much. I'm able to bring my best self. And last year, a couple times, I started a speech. Actually, it was the speech at Cal Poly with the orientation leaders, who I absolutely love, and it's a crowd that loves me. I hopped up, and I hadn't done my here now beforehand. And it went fine. It was awesome because I'm awesome. But I noticed it took me like 10 minutes before I was in my groove. And I know you know what I'm talking about. You get in and you're able to function, but you're not really there. And then you get there and it's fine. And it was okay. But a week later, I was in another place, and I get up on this really nice, gorgeous stage, and I start giving my presentation, and I just can tell I'm not there. And it's because second time in a row, I forgot to do here now. And I stopped my speech. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to be better if I can just take a second. And I told them, I'm going to do this thing. And then I invited them to do it with me. And I'll show you what happened. I'm going to do it right now. And I'm going to invite you, if you would like, to take 3 deep breaths and think the word here on the inhale and now on the exhale at your own pace. Go. Do you notice? Does it feel different? What I noticed is that not only did I feel better, but I noticed the crowd was in a different place. And they were still with me, but I thought they were with me a little more. And it was calm at first, but then I noticed that when I would say something funny, they laughed even harder. And it was actually, it just went better. So I started incorporating this into my presentation. And a few months ago, a college student came up to me and said, you know, it's too bad you don't have stickers of that. And I am on college campuses all the time. I had somehow missed the fact that college students are into stickers. I don't know how I missed it, but I go, sticker, you mean like a bumper sticker? And they're like, you know, like a sticker, like you put on a water bottle or a computer. And I was like a bumper sticker. And then I started noticing, oh, everyone's got stuff stuck on the back of their laptop. And so I ended up I had my graphic designer pull together this design, and I printed up a bunch of stickers and have started putting it, one's in my car, one is on my water bottle, I got it on the back of my laptop, and it helps me be here and now. And if you want a sticker, I got tons of them. It turns out when you buy stickers and you order tons, they're really cheap. So I brought some if you want some. A couple more things to get us started, and then my intro will be done, and then we'll almost be done with the whole speech. If you didn't notice, on the back of your little blue envelope, it says, please don't peek. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't peek. Some of you already did. I saw you. It's okay. It's not into the world. I promise the payoff is better if you can resist the temptation to peek. The other thing I'm going to plant a seed with you for an activity we're going to do in a second is it will be helpful when we get to that part if I will have asked you to be thinking about a place that you go where you are very centered, where you feel grounded and balanced and calm. Because then I'm going to ask you about a time in your life or a time of your day where you regularly feel content, comfortable, happy, and complete. And then I'm also going to ask you to think of a group that you are connected to where you feel valued, appreciated, and included. And then finally, I'm going to ask you to think of a specific achievement that had you feeling confident, successful, accomplished, and competent. We're going to come back to those. I developed this activity a while back, and sometimes people were struggling to think of those things, so I'm planting that seed now. The last thing we need to do is my presentation is going to be talk at you just a little bit, give you a topic to stand and stretch and chat with somebody around you, and take a pee break if you need, or a smoke break, whatever comfort needs you need. I had a client once driving me around the state of Illinois giving talks to a Department of Aging presentations, and she asked me if I need a comfort break, and I didn't understand. She's like, do you need a comfort break? And I'm like, does she mean like a nap? I'm like, oh, you mean do I need to pee? Is that what? Okay, yes. My little 3 modules for you this morning is going to be to share some information that is hopefully going to help you be more effective at reaching out and connecting more effectively with students, with each other, with parents, community, life. And then I'm going to tell you a story that takes about 12 minutes to tell that you will not forget the 3 questions that come at the end, ever. And then the last part is going to be about reaching in, and I'm going to share a few tidbits with you. Stress management on the fly, 7 things that you probably know, but that you often forget to do that take seconds that can help you feel better. Are you in? Okay. So in order to set up our reaching out piece, I can tell this is what happened, and I know you know what it's like to be up here, and you're talking to the class, and they're with you, and then you just notice this. You're like, they're like this. Right? And it's not that you're boring. It's not that the content isn't good. It's just that they've sat too long. So you have already sat too long. I apologize in advance. We need to get you standing. So I'm going to ask you right now to please stand up, and I'm going to teach you something. It is the world's shortest aerobic move, okay? Trust me, this is a payoff that's worth it. There is 4 little steps involved. The first one is just you're going to, and I'm going to have you start with your left foot, my right foot. I'm going to lead with my right so it'll mirror better. You're going to just do this. Watch first. I'm just going to have you step forward, step back, step forward, step back. And you're going to do that 4 times. Okay, so let's all do this. Step forward, step back, step forward with your left foot, step back. Step forward, step back, step forward, step back. I see that, yeah, some of you, okay, not so much. Okay, I know. Sip some caffeine. We're going to get there. We're already almost done. I mean, it's that easy. The second one is we're just going to go sideways. And again, it's a little bit easier if you lead with your left. I'll show you with my right. You're going to go step, 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 step. Let's all do it. Step, 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 step. We literally just have one left. Hang with me. This one. Oh, look, you're still going. You're like, he didn't say stop. Simon says, you didn't say stop. Stop. The last move is you're gonna climb a spiral staircase in 8 steps. So let me just show you. Don't try to do it yet. Watch first. You're just gonna go step, 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 step. And the goal is to do it in 8 steps because then you're gonna launch right back into step forward, step back, step forward, step back. Make sense? So let's start from the top. We're gonna do a double set, and then step up around. So step forward, step back, step forward, step back, step side, step side, step side, step side. Now you're going to go step, 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 step. Do it one more time. Step forward, step back. Step forward, step back. Step side, step side, step side, step side. Then step, 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 step. Give yourselves a hand. That was very good. That was very good. Grab a seat when you need. My guess is the elementary teachers loved that, and the junior high teachers were like, ugh. And the high school teachers were like, that is so stupid. Because you end up becoming your students, right? You didn't know? Oh, it's true. Okay. It's inevitable. So these are my 4 thoughts about helping you be more effective at connecting with others. Stepping forward is about making deposits, about being generous, about connecting with people. Stephen Covey talks about thinking about relationships as emotional bank accounts. And I love that metaphor, especially for when you're talking about Myers-Briggs stuff, thinkers and feelers. I call them head leaders and heart leaders. People that are more focused in the head, they are really good with the logic. They're really good with let's get the job done. Whereas we heart people are a little bit more focused on relationships and emotions. Oh, I see my heart people. They're like, yes. And then when I say, let's do an icebreaker, I can see the head people because they're like, oh, the icebreaker. But when I say to head leaders, when I say to head people, isn't it true that when you've got a group of people that are supposed to work together, if communication lines are open, everyone is on the same page about things, isn't it true that work can happen efficiently and effectively? And they all get very excited about efficiency and effectiveness. And so they, yes. And I said, then listen, we're not computers. And people are complicated creatures. And to get them to work together, it's very helpful that we build relationship. And I know it feels like we're going to talk about a retreat when I say that. We're not. We're talking about building effective, efficient work teams. And if you think of relationships as emotional bank accounts, when you get to know someone, when you listen to them, when you make a commitment to them and then follow through and do what you said you were going to do when you said you would do it, that's a deposit. And when you build up deposit, there becomes reserves that, when there's an inevitable withdrawal, can help you recover, or can be favors that you can ask. Sometimes sociologists use the term social capital to talk about the value that accrues when you build and maintain and deepen relationships with people. One of the reasons I like to share about that, if I ask you to think about somebody that you work with on a regular basis, it could be a student, it could be a colleague, it could be an administrator or a parent, somebody that you have to be around, but that is really hard. There's not a good relationship. If I ask you to get a specific example, if they're in the room, don't look at them. Some of you started looking around the room, and that's not helpful because that's a withdrawal in the relationship. If you look at someone and go, But my hypothesis is, if I ask you to think back to how did that relationship get wonky, sometimes it's because of withdrawal. Sometimes somebody said something or somebody did something. But I would submit to you that many times in workplace relationships, The reason there's a strain is not because of withdrawals as much as because of a lack of deposits. And when I worked at the UW, my staff, we would do evals at the halfway through the year and at the end. And I got lots of high marks for lots of things. I was really good in the areas that I was good at. But there was some consistent feedback from a couple people every semester that said, Paul's really good, this, and this. He sometimes plays favorites. And of course, as a new professional, I was like, no, I don't. Shut up. But it came up the next semester, and it came up the next semester. And I'm like, this is a problem. It is happening. Multiple staffs are saying it. It's me, it's not them. So I sat down with my supervisor and I said, I don't want to be playing favorites. I tried really hard this semester. I was very conscious. I tried to treat everyone the same. But it is true that anytime you get a group of people together, as you're getting to know them, some of them you just connect with more naturally than others. True? Well, this is what I slowly figured out. What happens is my staff of 10 would come together. We go through 2 weeks of intense training before the year started. A couple of them, after the first day, stuck around, found out they were in the same major that I had taken. They had a little more interest of their job as maybe a career. We talked a little bit more. I got to know them better. Halfway through the semester, this happened. It was midterms. And a couple of students came in, and I knew that Julie had had her organic chemistry midterm. And I asked her, how was organic chemistry? Because as a psychology major, organic chemistry, ugh. And so I said, how did it go? And she said, it was awful, blah, blah, blah. And this other student that was one of her colleagues came in and was really quiet and has always been really quiet. And a good RA, perfectly good guy, just really quiet. I never really did connect with him very much. Sat there, listened, didn't had much to say. Turned around and left. And as we were finishing the conversation, Julie said, by the way, the next time Steve comes in the office, you should probably ask him how he did on the organic chemistry midterm, because he just took it. And I didn't ask him. And it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I didn't know. And the reason I didn't know is because a few weeks earlier in our one-on-one session, I kept it all about work because I'd never really gotten to know him. So I asked, how's school, how's life? He said, fine. And huge light bulbs went off for me is that's where I'm not making deposits, and then I end up making withdrawals. And so I created a new rule for myself. By the time midterms came along, I pulled out a roster of the staff that worked for me, and I wrote down everything I could think of about them. Did I know where they were from? Did I know their major? Did I know a little bit about their life? Do they have siblings? Are their parents married? I just tried to scribble it down. And every year, every semester, it happened that there were 4 or 5 that I knew more about, and there was a couple that I didn't know much of anything. And I didn't judge myself, and I didn't beat myself up. I said, I know who I need to spend a little bit more time with. Not, I would like to have a warm and connected relationship with you. Let's go away together. No. I just made sure I asked a little bit more specific probing questions. Well, what is your major? And where are you from again? Oh, yeah. So that by the end of the semester, I could send people off on break knowing where they were going, knowing how their semester was. And sure enough, my last 2 semesters of doing that, very little comments. I still had people that I felt more connected to, but I was able to even out the thing. Who is it in your work that if you made some deposits in that relationship, might not become your best friend, but might make it easier to get along with, make it easier for you to connect with them, make it easier for you to educate them or be colleagues with them? The other thing I came across, this is getting a little bit of buzz now. Adam Grant wrote a book, Give and Take. He put people in 3 basic categories: givers, takers, and matchers. He said some people are very generous when they're in their workplace. They give and they give and they give and they give without trying to figure out, am I going to get something out of this? And then there are takers who take and take and take, and it's all about them, and it's what's in it for them. And then the vast majority of people, in general, 85% of people are matchers. They're happy to be generous as long as they're ultimately going to get something out of it. So most of us in this room, if we ask this really simple questionnaire, would come out as primarily a giver, primarily a taker, primarily a matcher. And most of us are matchers. But what we found out is the generous people, when you look across professions, and he studied, I think, 200 different professions, and he gave this instrument, and he asked people to define how successful they were in their career. He found that givers come out disproportionately at the bottom, the least successful, and also the top, the most successful. And when he asked more questions, he discovered that givers are at risk for burning out, giving and giving and giving and burning out and losing their effectiveness, or being taken advantage of by takers and matchers who are happy to take and aren't necessarily signing up to give back to that person because that person isn't asking. And when givers learn how to make sure they don't give themselves away completely, and also are on guard for colleagues, people they serve, who might be takers and might take and take and take, that they can build some boundaries to take care of themselves. Givers who are struggling can end up becoming empowered. Are there ways that you could be a little bit more generous in your work? You are busy. You are overworked. You are underpaid. I teach people the M&M theory of work sharing. I had a group I was consulting with once. Was at this conference where I was keynote. I did a breakout session, and they didn't want me to do any more breakout sessions because people tended to go to mine and they left. They didn't go to the other breakout sessions. So when they brought me back the next year for the event, they said, we want to use you, but we don't want you to be a breakout session after one. And so we ended up inventing this little thing where people could sign up for consulting time, a half hour of time with Uncle Paul, and we had a whiteboard and we were taking notes. And this group came up to me, a group of 6 people, and they said, we are a fairly high-functioning team. We get along well. There's not a lot of conflict. We want to be more supportive of each other, and there's just no time. And I listened to them and I talked, and we had this room they had supplied for us, had little treats, and there were these coffee cups that no one had used. And I had brought in a couple of bags of M&Ms. And I had this idea, and what I did is I took out, there were 5 people, I put 5 coffee cups out, and I put, I think, 5 M&Ms in each of the coffee cups. And I said, if you can imagine these M&Ms are each units of work. Either it's like a project or it's like an hour of your work. And you all have this stuff to do. And what you're afraid to do is you're afraid to offer to your colleague, here, let me take one of your M&Ms because you've already got 5. And it's going to add another one to your plate. But if you are fairly confident that at some point one of your colleagues is going to come and take one of your M&Ms and help you, there's no more M&Ms getting created when you do this. And it requires you to be generous, but not too generous. And it also requires you to be a taker sometime because you need to ask for help. You need to be willing to take somebody, if somebody offers, you need to be willing to say, yes, I will take your help. And we spent our half hour together. We talked about some other things. I sent them off. 2 years later, I hadn't been with the group for a couple years. 2 years later, I came in, and this group from Texas, they were from the Texas section of this organization. They came right up and they said, Paul, I want you to know, every employee orientation that we have, we teach the M&M theory of work sharing. And I was so embarrassed. I go, what the hell is the M&M theory of work sharing? Because I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, don't you remember in the room? And then they told me. I was like, oh, yes, that's good. I'm going to write that down so I remember it. I have these good ideas, and then if I don't write them down, they're gone. Could you be a little bit more purposeful, mindful with your work team? Maybe ask them, are there some ways we could be sharing M&Ms? Is there a way that some of us are feeling like we're taking on too much? Is there somebody that needs to be better at accepting help? Because sometimes that's the problem, right? Some of you think asking for help is a sign of weakness when it's an incredible, incredible sign of strength. Your little envelope says, don't look at it yet. The little envelope says the word ripples because what happened 20 years ago is some people came up to me after a presentation and said, this is really good. I'm really fired up. I know it's not going to stick. Can you come back to our school and give us a pep talk every Monday morning? And I said, no. But I thought about it, and I ended up reaching out to a group of people who had attended that event. And I said, I'll tell you what I have thought of. I will send you an email on Monday mornings, because Monday mornings are, with a couple of inspirational quotes and something to think about for the week. 60 seconds or less to read, no marketing, no cost, because people love the free stuff. And I would be willing to do that if you're willing to help me find cool inspirational quotes to share. So in January of 1999, I sent out this email to 75 people, and we called it Ripples, to focus on the ongoing impact that our smallest actions have. And by the end of the week, 20 people had shared cool quotes that I could use for a future issue. And a whole bunch of people had contacted me and said, hey, my colleague forwarded this email, can I get on the list? And the next week it went out to a couple hundred people. Well, 978 Mondays later, I'm still sending out Ripples every Monday morning. Only now it goes out to 30,000 people. And I share that with you not to try to impress you. I share that with you to impress upon you that you have no idea how much your smallest impact ripples. I sometimes think educators are afraid to pause long enough to think about all of the little moments that somebody has received a gift, a learning, a something, and taken it off and done something with it. That if they spent 5 minutes just thinking about this and this and this, that it would overwhelm them. And I'm so worried that in your attempt to not have a big ego, that you deny yourself sometimes just imagining. My Ripples number, it shows up because my little system says 30,000 people are getting it. But what freaks me out, what is so delightful, is when I bump into somebody who got Ripples years ago, they changed jobs and forgot they were off the list, and has a really specific story about how 1 week a big awful thing had happened, and then Ripples came and really zoomed in and helped them. A few years ago, we had a Ripples that was called, we theme each one, and it was about being the light. And the quote that I found to share was, believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and believe that you might be that light for someone else. And each Ripples has a couple of quotes and then something to ponder for the week that I write. And the part that I wrote said, if you're having a bad day, keep your eyes open for somebody else's light. If you're having a good day, keep your eyes open for an opportunity to be the light for somebody else. If you want to have the best day ever, keep your eyes open for both. One of my goals with education is to find resources that are not only something that helps my presentation, but that people can turn around and use. And I have found an amazing source of videos that if you're not familiar with it, you want to write this website down. It's http:// Who does that? www. For some of you in the room, we used to have to type that. www.youtube.com. Oh, you know, okay, you know it, sorry. There's a lot of junk out there. There is some amazing stuff out there, and people, this was a TV commercial, and it's got some good stuff. So one of the things I want you to know, I know I'm in a room full of people who are looking for good resources, that I'm storing up all the links to these so that if somebody says, ooh, I want to watch that, I'll be able to zoom it to you really quick. We've stepped forward, we need to step back. And stepping back is when you find yourself in a situation, I don't know, maybe on social media, where you're like, la, 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 Facebook. That person said, what? That person posted, what? And you're like, I can't believe. I know that you've never done that, I'm sure. Have you ever done that and then you come back a half hour later and you saw what you wrote and you're like, I did not do that. Somebody hacked my account. How many of you, seriously, you've posted something, you go back and you're like, I don't remember being that upset. Have you had that? You know, that's actually, you are lying. You guys are like, I would never do such a thing. I found this amazing book called Talking to Crazy by Mark Goulston that is about working with people who are rational. He is a psychologist. Right away at the beginning of the book, he unpacks the term, for a lot of people, understandably, the term crazy can be a tricky term to use because of the way that's used to talk about mental illness. He quickly talks about, I'm not talking about people with mental illness, I'm talking about people who are being irrational. And he quickly explains, we're all crazy sometimes. We are all sometimes guilty of speaking or acting irrationally. And he has this fantastic book where I was introduced to the term amygdala hijack or an emotional hijack. And Daniel Goleman, in his book, Emotional Intelligence, apparently is the person that coined the term. And it's the idea that when we get in that fight or flight mode, that what happens is, boom, chemicals come pouring over our system that take over and control. And especially because we're afraid in that situation and that we're in danger, we sometimes do things and say things from a defensive posture that a half hour later, when all of these chemicals are done running through our system, that we wouldn't have said that, we wouldn't have done that. And one of the hallmarks of an amygdala hijack is 20 to 30 minutes after you say something or do something, you're often either regretting it or you're rationalizing it. Well, the reason I said that was because. And what fascinates me, this book, by the way, I know some of you are like, I need to read that book. It turned out the electronic copy sold a lot better than the actual hard copy book. And they found out it's because a lot of people wanted to read it, but they didn't want their coworkers or spouse to see that they were reading this book. Honey, I've got an idea. No, I don't want to tell you that you're crazy. But what I love about this book is that a big chunk of the first book, because you right away, don't you want to know, okay, how can I deal with people better? The first half of the book, he's talking about how to deal with the biggest problem, and that's you. He says the biggest barrier that you have to engaging somebody who is irrational is they bring out your crazy and that they knock you off your best self. And so a lot of the book is teaching you to think about what triggers me and how do I keep from getting triggered in situations. Then, because the big technique, and the book is fantastic, I highly recommend it. Once you're confident, you can stay grounded and centered. The best way to engage somebody who's being irrational is to lean into their crazy, is to be able to see how, from their perspective, it seems logical to say what they're saying or do what they're doing. And he's a FBI hostage negotiator. And what he's talking about is your ability when somebody is killing people, that there is a way to empathize and to say, I see why you're making those choices. And to really, because you know when someone's faking you and pretending to connect with you, it doesn't work. And to be able to say to somebody and mean it, I get why you're making the decisions that you're making. It makes sense to me, is the only hope that these FBI hostage negotiators have of getting them to put down their weapons. And the ability to stay calm, the ability to take a step back and bring in a break, count to 10, count to 10,000. Knowing when you need to step back is so important. Every Tuesday morning at 9:30 Eastern Time, the following quote gets read to me. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is the power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. That's how my therapist opens every one of our sessions. And after a couple years of hearing that every Tuesday morning at 9:30 Eastern, it starts sinking in that so much of my unconscious habitual behavior is being triggered by something that's understandable because of things that happened early on in my life. And that even though I didn't have control of those things, and even though as a 50-year-old man I'm still impacted by them, in between every stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies the ability for me to choose a response. And in that choice gives me growth and gives me freedom. Do you need to get better at building in brakes when something is getting hot and taking a second to step back? Because after we've stepped forward and after we've stepped back, the next thing is about stepping sideways and finding the way to look at things from somebody else's perspective, which can be so hard. Now, from Wausau to here, I took Highway 29, right? This morning, the weather was different than when I drove out here yesterday for my sound check. This afternoon, it took me 14 minutes. It took me longer this morning. And I need to know from the experts, how many of you are on 29 on a regular basis? Okay. In the conditions that we had this morning, what is the proper speed to be driving on Highway 29? Help me out, locals. What is the proper speed? The normal speed limit, I believe, is 65. Is that right? And by the way, if it's dry, like so yesterday when it was dry and it was fine, what is the correct speed? If the speed limit says 65, you are to drive? 75. Nice! No one, did any single one of you in this room say 65? Raise your hand if you said 65. Way to follow the rules. I heard a lot of 70. How many of you said 70? How many of you said 75? How many said as fast as I can get away with? Yeah. We all have our speed. Now this morning, if you took it, what was the speed? What did you drive? How many of you were going slower than 50, like 45? Okay, praise be. Thank you. I thought I was the only one. Now, I wasn't doing it because I was an idiot. I was doing it because I lived in Wisconsin for 20 years. I know how to drive on these roads, but I've lived in Ohio for 5. So I knew I don't have my driving legs. And you know you didn't want to be the person who was inconvenienced by me smashing into you. So I'm like, I'm going to go slower than everyone, and I'm not going to use their speed as the right speed for me, because, And so if you were going 50, I get it. How many of you are going 50-ish? 55-ish? Yeah, I saw you. 60? You people. That's fine if you want to risk your life, but what about me? Because ultimately, it's all about me. The correct speed on the interstate is the speed that you have chosen to go. And anyone who is going slower than you is an idiot. And anyone going faster than you is crazy. If somebody goes to a buffet and eats more than you, oh, they're a pig. If somebody goes to a buffet with you and eats less than you, well, they're just like missing out on a bargain. We operate from saying the way we do things is the right way to do things. If someone's going faster, it's too fast. If someone's going slower, it's too slow. My way is the right way. Never mind that your way changes day to day based on the weather, based on the traffic, based on your mood. How many of you got the right song on and suddenly you're going a little bit faster? How many of you put on a little sad song and maybe you're like slowing down? Or if it's just like you're in really zone, you're like, life is good. I'm not in a hurry. And then somebody behind you like, God, and you realize they're going the speed limit. Oh. Stupid people, crazy people, and evil. And I'll tell you, I lived in Wisconsin for 20 years. I lived 5 blocks from the Capitol when there were these big groups of educators coming around. And I walked up every day, listened to speakers, and when that all started happening, sorry to bring this up, you're like, zip it, we don't want to. But I discovered there was a lot more of this going on, where the people on the other side are either stupid, they're crazy, or they're evil, or all three. This last presidential campaign, like nothing I've ever seen before. When the video was playing, I came over here to sip my Diet Coke. I mean my organic orange juice. and I set down my clicker, and ever since I'm like, one part of my brain's like, where's my clicker? Stupid, crazy, meanie. Here's the truth. If by stupid you mean not informed, yep, there's some people on the other side who are not as informed as you are about certain issues. If by crazy you mean not rational, yeah, there's some people who are thinking, who are acting irrationally. And if by evil you mean not caring or not compassionate towards a certain group of people, yep, I'll give it to you. But that is only useful if you can remember there are people on our side that are sometimes not as informed as they could be, not as rational, and indeed, not as compassionate as they could be. I am guilty sometimes of being stupid, of not knowing all the facts when I'm spouting. I am guilty of being not rational. When something gets me going, I go. My people are known for the drama. Shut up, you knew. Don't act like you didn't know. You've known since 3rd grade. And you love me anyway. Thank you. There's like 2 people like, what is he talking about? Now you're in. Okay. I'm guilty of not caring sometimes about certain groups of people. And I noticed that. And I spent a lot more time off Facebook in the last year, trying to get better. Because I tend to, this won't shock you, I tend to lean a little bit left in my politics. But I'm very proud of the fact that my news feed, I have 5,000 Facebook friends, and thousands of them lean right, or are in the middle, or I don't want to talk about it. And I quickly learned, when I joined Facebook, it's because some people had started a little Ripples fan group and wanted me to be on it, and I joined their little book of faith, even though I knew it wasn't going to last, because MySpace is where it's at. But I got on their little Facebook thing, and I joined their little social media blah, 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 even though MySpace is where it's at. And then I was on Facebook one morning looking at this newly thing where the post came up in a little scroll. Fancy. MySpace didn't have it like that. And all of a sudden, they were talking about something that was happening at Virginia Tech. And I literally found out about the Virginia Tech shootings from Facebook. And all these college kids were freaking out because they have RAs. They live in residence halls. And this thing was happening that some of them found out from the news, but most of whom were finding out because of what was getting posted on Facebook. And that night, when I logged off, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my face feed was just blowing up, and there was this group that a bunch of people were joining that was saying, praying for Hokies. And I joined it, and I was 5,011th person in the group. And when I logged off at 7 o'clock that night, there were over 100,000 people in that group. And I said to my friends at dinner, I said, Facebook is here to stay, and it's going to change everything. Because the way these students found out about this news, and it suddenly felt like it was happening on their campus. And we watched it happen with Orlando Pulse. We watched it happen with Florida last week. We watched these happen with the news where, boom, we find out about it, and we react to it, and we watch everyone else react to it. And when we do, because we tend to seek comfort and hang out with people who are like us, it's easier for us to remember we're right, and of course the other side's wrong. And I noticed that when this started showing up in my news feed a lot, that some people got really excited by it, and for some people, they really didn't like it. And their response to Black Lives Matter was, well, what about all lives? And so then you started seeing all lives matter. What's wrong with that? And some people really liked that, and then some people that made mad. And because I'm so blessed to have people who are all over the place in my feed, and I'm really getting better at listening and asking questions and listening, it took me a while, but I realized that some people were seeing Black Lives Matter, and they were interpreting it as Black Lives Matter more. And other people were seeing the same thing, and it read Black Lives Matter too. And what I did one day, actually, it was just after some things were happening at University of Missouri, that I put together this slide. And I asked this group of people, I was in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, Chadron State College, and I asked them to think about the fact that regardless of what they think of it, and whether their interpretation was Black Lives Matter more, Black Lives Matter too, I asked them, can you see how somebody would think about it in the opposite way that you're thinking about it? And if they did, can you see how that would change their reaction? Now, the first question is, let's try to figure out what the intent is, right? I think it's really good to say, the people who use the term Black Lives Matter, do you think they mean this or do you think they mean that? I think that's good to know and to try to figure that out. But I think it's also true that impact matters also. And even if somebody means one thing, if it just really reads differently to somebody, even if they intellectually know that's not what they mean, it can still happen. I can tell you, when my little brother used to say, long before I came out to him, when he would say, that's so gay, or you're such a faggot. Number one, I thought he was telling me he knew I was gay. And number two, it was clearly he was communicating that's a bad thing. When I finally came out to him, he's like, oh my God, I had no idea. I was like, but you had a girlfriend. I'm like, yeah, kinda. She wanted to make out, I wanted to play Pac-Man. I'm sorry, for some of you, Pac-Man is a video game. But he said he had no idea, and those weren't words, and all the time when I hang out, and I should say, certainly much less than it used to be, but I'm on college campuses all the time, and I would hear that's so gay. And there was a period where I was like, don't say that! But I quickly changed my format, and I would say, help me, what do you mean when you say that? Can you use different words for just a second? And then when they say, oh, I just mean that's stupid, I'm like, okay, it's probably more helpful to me if you say that, because when you say that's so gay, to me, I think you mean it's a good thing. Since I'm gay, if they still look clueless, I'm like, hello. So I think it's good to look at intent and look to good at impact. But I think there's these X's up here that I assume is blocking for a play. But I assume it's helping me think about all these people are standing on these different X's, and they're all looking at the same thing. And when you change your view, it just really changes the thing. And we need to get better at standing up, not changing our views necessarily, but getting better at seeing how it looks from the other side. Stepping up is about bringing your highest, best self to situations. I heard a conversation that Oprah Winfrey was having with Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker. And he taught her an exercise that he does in one of his workshops. And it was a really fascinating activity. And it ended up inspiring me to develop it ended up being very different than what he did. But I started, for a speech about 1.5 years ago, I used it, and it really got some traction. And it involves us going back to those 4 things. And I'm going to ask you first, and I'm going to take some notes because I haven't done this one in a while, and I want to get it just right for you. Hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? We're going to stand up in just a second. I know I've been having you sit. I promised I was going to try to have you stand every 30 minutes. When you're grabbing your notes, you should grab the actual page that the thing is on. There we go. So the first thing I need you to do is I want you to think about a person or a challenge that you're having right now that is difficult for you to know what to do next. That you're in this situation. It could be little, it could be medium, it could be big, and it's either a person that you're kind of not sure how to interact with or what to do, or a situation. And I'm going to have you on a scale of 1 to 10 think about how stuck you feel. 10 meaning I don't know what to do, and 1 like I know what to do, I just don't have the courage or strength to do it yet. And then we're going to set that aside on a shelf. And we're going to do the following. I'm going to ask you in just a minute to come back and think about a time excuse me, a place that you go that when you're there, you feel very centered, grounded, balanced, and calm. And actually, we'll just go ahead and go there now. Imagine being there and imagine what it feels like for you to be in a space where you feel very grounded and balanced and calm. And then I'm going to ask you to think of a time in your life where you felt content, comfortable, happy, and complete. And it could be a time in your schedule on a regular basis, or it could be a certain time period in your life. And just spend a few minutes really remembering what that felt like. And then I'm going to ask you to think about a group of people with whom you feel very connected to. When you're around them, you feel valued, appreciated, included. And finally, I'd like you to think of something, an achievement, something you've done that helped you feel confident, successful, accomplished, and competent. And remember what it felt like when you achieved it. And what I'm going to ask you to do is see if you can combine the feelings that you had from those 4 things, and notice as you have all 4 of those together, and then look back on the shelf at this thing or this person that you were feeling stuck, and see if you know anything or can think or feel differently, and you know, this is what I need to do. The activity, as Tony Robbins did it to Oprah, was merely to think about several things that she was really grateful for, and then turn her attention to that thing that she was stressed about. And I liked the idea of mixing it up instead of just thinking of gratitude, but thinking about a few different things. For me, one of the things I noticed as somebody who talks about a lot about diversity and inclusion, that little joke at the end where he said, I'll have to tell my girlfriend that I'm talking to another girl. For him to acknowledge her gender is profound. And I think that you might not have noticed that, but that for her, that probably was a real big gift, is for him to not think of her as a man that quickly. Is something, again, so many trans folks that I talk to, they want to be seen for who they are and how they see them. One of my high school classmates, he has a trans kid, and he said it's just so hard after a lifetime of knowing him to use the name she's picked out and to say her. And I said, yes, and from what I've heard from parents of trans kids, one of the things, just like I think this is true for parents of gay kids, is that there is, in a sense, a loss that needs to be grieved. The straight kid you thought you had, the male kid you thought you had, is gone. And you've got some grieving to lose so that you can get to know and get excited about the kid that you do have. And I personally think it applies to a whole bunch of stuff. You thought this kid was going to be like this. You thought this kid was going to do this. And in some ways, and it's so hard to start talking about loss and like it's like your kid died, because that's such a powerful thing to say to a parent. But to grieve the loss of the kid you thought you had helps you get excited about the kid you've got. And that is a grieving process that I think it's okay to feel sad, to feel lost, because it is a loss. You did have an idea of what your child was going to be like, and it is going away. My thought was to say, how could you apply this personally or professionally? But instead, I want to jump because time keeps ticking, and I want to make sure that we have time to get to an activity. So I'm going to jump forward here, and I'm going to have you get out your little envelope. Don't open it yet, but get it out. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Raise your hand if you did not get one. I want to make sure every single person has one. Okay, we're good. Everyone has one. In just a second, you are about to get one of 30 inspirational quotes. Okay? So don't open it yet. These are called Ripples cards. There's a deck of 30 different cards in there. And if you believe in God, if you believe in a higher power, I want you to imagine for the next 30 seconds that you're about to get a message you're supposed to get at this point in your life. If you don't believe in God, this is a message from the universe. If you don't believe in the universe, this is a message from Miss Cleo, your psychic friend. And for some of you in the room, Miss Cleo was a television personality who went to jail, and now she died. I'm sorry if you didn't know. But here's the truth, the way we do this activity. If you believe that things happen for a reason, I'd like you to imagine that there is a reason. You're about to get one of 30 quotes. If you do not believe that things happen for a reason, you can still choose to find meaning in the randomness of one of 30 quotes. How can I make this useful in my work or in my life? And there is a catch. The card that you have with you right now is not for you. Because every single time we cross paths with people in this room, in this building, in your buildings, in life, they have a message for us, and we have a message for them. So what I'd like you to do right now is switch cards at least twice with the person next to you, with the person in front of you, with the person behind. Switch cards, front, behind, side to side. And now you have your card. Open it up. Open it up. And I'm going to invite you to stand if you would like. Take a stretch break and stand and get in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. Share with your partners what your quote is and what meaning it has or what reason it might have for showing up. So go ahead and stand up just to give you a little bit of a stretch break. Share your quote with somebody around you. What your quote is and why you got it. All right. Raise your hand if you got a quote that was definitely relevant to your life. I forgot to mention that sometimes the quotes come early, and right now you're like, I have no idea. Weekly Ripples come out. It's absolutely free, no marketing to you, so you're going to sign up for that if you want. I also post a inspirational quote every day on social media, so either at Ripples Guy or it is my profile, and /The Ripples Guy is my page. This is my whole life. This is everything I do not edit. This is, I edit. This is, I just do professional things. If you don't agree with me politically, you can follow me here and you don't ever have to hear me talk about who I'm excited about, blah, blah, blah. That, if you can handle it, I don't try to convince you to believe my way. I'm very respectful. I'm so proud of the engagement that we have, but it's more like I talk about what I need to talk about. I have a boyfriend. Shut up. Shocking. And we're buying a house on Monday. Shut up. That is news. Okay. My family doesn't know yet. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm like keeping it the secret, but it's going to be on Facebook on Monday. I had no plan to tell you that. Okay. Twitter, if you're a Twitter person, @RipplesGuy is my regular, I post all kinds of stuff. All Unleash Ripples is a single quote posted at 10 a.m. Wisconsin time every single day. This is, I'm putting up here, it will not apply, you won't be interested, some of you, but the other cool thing is a secret backdoor that Twitter has. Even if you're not on Twitter, even if you don't know what Twitter is, you can get a free text of somebody's tweets. And all you have to do is text the phrase follow space Unleash Ripples all jammed together to the number 40404. And all you get, there's no marketing. I don't get to know your number is out there. I don't even know how many people do it. All it does is texts you an inspirational quote every morning at 10 a.m. If you just love quotes, how many quote lovers do we have in the room? If you grab your device right now and go to this website, 2rpl.me, you will just see a logo of the Ripples. You click on it, a random quote pops up. A friend of mine made this for me in 10 minutes when I found out a big talk I was giving, half the people were going to be dialing in remotely, and I didn't have Ripples cards to give them. And I was like, ah! And my friend said, give me a second, you've got lots of quotes, let me whip you together a website. So that is there for you. And finally, mcse@2rpl.me. You can take a picture of this or you can send me right now. If you want to send me an email, with feedback about this presentation. If you want a copy of the videos, if you have a question, I am very happy. It sometimes takes me a couple days to get back to you, but I'm very happy to give you anything that you would like, so please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to teach you, I'm going to leave that up there because some people want to either do it or text. I need to teach you something real quick that's going to get us out of here on time. I'm going to teach you a series of hand gestures. You need your hands in your lap, and the first one is very simple. It just goes like this. You're going to take a deep breath in, and you're going to go, do that, and then you're going to clap. Okay, you're a third of the way through. It's that easy. Okay, from the top. The next one, you're going to do this. Do that. And then this. Ha, ha, ha. Do them both together. Ha, ha, ha. The last three are really easy. You're going to leave your hand there and go, mmm. Mmm. Whoosh. Do those last three again. Mmm. Mmm. Whoosh. Put it all together, hands in your lap, and it goes like this. Ha, ha, ha. Mmm. Whoosh. Why did I teach you that? The first grade teachers are like, it doesn't matter. It was fun. No, kindergarten teachers, that probably maybe even, I don't know how high I can go. All I know is when I hang out with John Punsak, my friend who's a fourth grade teacher, he's so like, I'm so excited to see you. And I'm like, oh, hi, Mr. Punsak. And my friends that teach junior high, they treat me differently. It's like a whole like, what do you want? Oh, hi. And that's the love they get to show in their school. These 7 hand gestures correspond to 7 really quick stress management techniques. So it's simply to remind you to breathe. Do you know that when you get stressed out, your body is getting you ready to fight or to run? And that's a great thing to do when you want to fight or run. It's great to have a breathing. But most of the time, you don't get to punch what stresses you out. Most of the time, you don't get to look at someone and go, ah! And so it helps us to remember that we need to take a deep breath. So everyone take a deep breath right now. The next one is a connect. The clap is about connecting. If I ask you to think about the people in your life that you're around on a regular basis, and in particular, can you think of people that when you're around them, you instantly feel better about yourself and your possibilities, and you're just like, I got this? How many of you can very easily think of a couple people? If I ask you to think about all the people that you're around, and somebody that you're around that when you're around them, they just suck the life force out of you. How many of you can think of someone? Again, don't look at them if they're here. Don't, some of you, Here's my suggestion. Spend more minutes next week with the people who infuse energy into your life. And you don't have to eliminate the people who drain you. Because sometimes you can't, because it's your kid, or it's your boss, or it's your colleague, it's somebody you're stuck with. I just say, spend fewer minutes next week with the people who drain you. Reach out to the people who infuse energy in your life and limit the access that some people. There are people in my family, there are people in my friendship circle. I love them. I don't want to get rid of them, but they get fewer minutes of my time because they drain me. Energy vampires, they're called. So we go from this to this to this. You know exercise is good for you. We've made a huge mistake in trying to teach people to exercise because it will help you live longer and because it is good for you. Because most people at some point are like, I don't know if I want to live any longer. I'm exhausted. And I don't want to do something today that has impact and for 5 years down the road. How many of you would be willing to believe that when you eat a Snickers bar, you feel good, but after a half hour, you dip? Yes. And if you take a 10-minute walk, not so strenuous that you can't have a conversation on the phone the whole time, you feel better for 3 hours. How many of you would believe that without reading the research article? Because let me tell you, the research is consistent. 5 to 10-minute walk, brisk enough to get your heart rate up, not so much that you can't have a conversation. 3 hours later, people are still feeling better. Don't double the amount of time you're going to the gym, or don't go join the gym if you're not at a gym. All I'm saying is move more than you're moving now. Find some little micro moments where you can stretch yourself a little bit. Laughter is an amazing thing. If I ask you to fake laugh for 5 seconds with me, everyone in this room is going to fake laugh for 5 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. Did you know that hearty laughter, authentic or fake, like what you just did, 3 minutes of it is roughly equivalent to 30 minutes of cardio exercise? Now listen, not calorie burning, not like, ha 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 ha, that is not how this works. We call it cardio exercise because it exercises your heart. And we know that your heart is a muscle and it needs exercise. And what we know is that laughter not only is a very concentrated exercise for your heart, it releases chemicals in your body that fight disease and deaden pain. And when we tell people who have just had open heart surgery to watch their favorite comedies, their favorite sitcoms and their favorite comedy movies, they report lower pain numbers. They get out of the hospital 1.5 days early on average, and they have fewer post-operation infections. Laughter really is a powerful medicine. The next piece is about savoring. Is about, and you pretty easily believed me when I told you about the research about walking for 10 minutes having an impact for 3 hours. What if I told you there was an activity that you could do for 5 minutes that would have you feeling better for 3 days? And it's not that one. But thank you for going there. It might, I don't know. I haven't read the research. All I know is, I love that some of you are like, oh, I get it, okay. You guys, opening a notebook and setting a timer for 5 minutes and writing down 5 minutes worth of things that you are grateful for elevates people's satisfaction with life and confidence that they can get through tough stuff for 3 days. You talk about a wise investment of 5 minutes. Meditation. I heard that some school district here has somebody that's trained in mindfulness and they're spending time on mindfulness. And what we know is that spending a few minutes getting quiet. Some of you may hear the term meditation, and you may think a certain pose and om, and that's one form of meditation. But so is getting an inspirational quote and reading over it a few times. So is taking 3 deep breaths and thinking, here now, here now, here now. So is going for a walk in nature. So is opening a holy book and picking a passage and reading it. Those are all forms of meditation. And what we're finding, the research is consistent and amazing. That people who meditate as few as 10 minutes a day in a few weeks report feeling calmer, feeling more confident about themselves and about the challenges they're facing. And then the last piece is releasing, letting go. We carry stuff with us. One of the people that passed me on the interstate this morning, I was mad at for a half hour after I got here. And I realized if I stay focused on that person, I'm going to miss out. How often do we go home with something that happened? How often do we come to school with something that happened? Sometimes releasing is about tossing something, throwing it away. Sometimes it's just about setting it down or setting it aside. I know you know how to do this because I know you've showed up not feeling good and needing to deliver. There are ways in which you naturally let go of things so that you can do your job. There might be things that you're accidentally holding on to that are heavy. Is it time to set something down? Do it with me one more time, these hand gestures, because I want you to remember this forever. Breathe, connect, move, laugh, savor, meditate, release. Give yourselves a hand. That was awesome. It's so amazing. Time is going so fast. I got 9 minutes left, and I'm going to use every one of them. I need to show you this video. It takes about 5 minutes. Again, it's sitting there. It's never gone viral. It's got 13,000 views. I feel like it is my responsibility to show it as many people as possible. I asked her if I could donate to her high school. She picked one of the high school groups. I sent a check for $500. A few months later, I said, I need to write you a check for $500. And she's like, oh, I'll donate. I'm like, no, you won't. I already gave some money. This is for you to start your life. This is good. Our time is moments from done. This is the only time our paths were meant to cross. Almost all the people I see, I get to see you once. If this was a good use of your time, please know that not only do we really do owe MCSE a big thanks because they found the dollars for this and they made it possible for us to get together. I also need to thank you for not just showing up because you were supposed to, but showing up and saying, okay, what does this guy got? Because sometimes teacher groups, it's a little bit harder. They're a little bit more like this. I started with an apology. I need to end with a thank you. I'm not supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to make it to today. I was that kid you just loved some days and wanted to strangle. And you saw that I was hurting on the inside and that I was struggling, not yet ready to realize I was different in a world that doesn't always handle difference. Some yucky stuff happened to me as a kid that helped me believe that that's what gay was. And when I realized I was gay, I didn't want to be that. And I thought my option was to leave the planet. And the first time I tried, I whispered, and my teachers didn't hear me. But when I left school that day to go jump on a train, to take a train far away because my friend Steve had taken his life a few months early, and the awful thing was his little brother found him. And I didn't want that to happen to my sister. And 5 minutes before that train was supposed to leave Carbondale, Illinois, 3 teachers jumped on the train. And Mrs. Dykes and Mrs. Grimmer and Mrs. Burris had figured out that something I had whispered meant something. That didn't end my desire to leave the planet, and it unfortunately didn't end the attempts. But I made it. And I eventually figured out that every time I was called weird as a kid, as an adult meant that I was special. And that for all the ways I didn't fit in, I get to stand out. And while it was so tragic as a kid to be different, it is so lucrative to be special. I hope that some of what I shared with you, you can take back into your classrooms, you can apply to yourself professionally, and you can apply personally. But if the only reason our paths were meant to cross was for me to say, I made it, and even though I haven't gotten a chance to come back and tell you each individually, I got to tell Mrs. Grimmer and Mrs. Burris and Mrs. Dykes before she passed away that I made it and that their help mattered. You don't get paid enough. If the only thing you get from a job is money, you will never get paid what you're worth. Keep asking and fighting for raises, and please know that you make such a difference in this world. Thank you for letting me to drive all the way to the middle of nowhere and spend a morning with you. Thank you so much, Marathon County. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You are awesome. Thank you. Thank you. We're 4 minutes late. Some of you got to jump on a bus. Others, you got to jump in the car. I'll stick around here if some people want to do that. Is there any announcements for the good of the cause? People are on their way. Oh, awesome. Have a good rest of the day.